And welcome back to the OHIO podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Buckeye Boggs. That guy up there is Sergeant MVP Aaron Brown. Over there, that's the wild man, Chris Wilds. And you are you. And we're thankful to have you back in tonight as we preview Ohio State's second game of the season, week number 2, Youngstown State. Does this get your juices flowing, Chris, or what?
Youngstown State, man. I'm so excited. You
It's
know
the
what? You
home
know what
home
excites
of Jim
me?
Tressel, though, man.
I was gonna say it would excite me if they said Trussell was dotting the I.
Yeah.
Right?
That would excite me because the
If
man deserves it.
if it's not a sellout yet, and they announced that, I'm about guarantee it would be.
I'll tell you what. I would skip my prearranged event for the weekend, and I would actually buy a ticket.
There you go. Aaron, how about you? Are you super stoked for this noon kickoff against the Penguins?
Uh, I'll tell you, it's not every day that you get to play a team nicknamed the Penguins. So
You would think that we're playing Alaska Anchorage University or something with the
I
nickname
know, right?
Penguins.
Antarctica State University, something
What
crazy.
what would the Youngstown State mascot be? Should be.
The mobsters.
I was gonna say something to do with the mob. I don't know. You know, like the silhouette from
Well, you
I don't know,
could do
was it the
something with
Goodfellas or
steel
something?
too. I mean, they were a steel city.
They
That's
were
true.
they were, yeah.
Maybe a hard hat.
I believe the movie Deer Hunter was actually filmed partially
It
in
was.
Youngstown.
It
So
was
maybe
indeed.
Okay.
maybe they could be the deer hunters. That'd be interesting.
The
Well, they're gonna
Rusty
try.
Goaters.
They're gonna try to be Buckeye hunters. As I interview, and you'll hear this if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast. I interviewed Mr. Wetzel, Joel Wetzel. He's the beat writer for the Tribune Chronicle there, covering Youngstown State University sports. And they're coming in this thing. They're not backing down. I'm glad, good for them. I'm glad they're coming in guns a-blazing. They're not just going to come in, collect their paycheck, and go back to Northeast Ohio. They're coming to play football. This is not a this is not a average or below average Division One AA school. This is a proud program, a school where Jim Tressel won 4 national championships at that level. Yes, it's a different level. Yes, Ohio State should win this handily. That's the expectations for this week. But I want to see that big jump from week 1 to week 2. Aaron, as a coach, why is it that the greatest improvement they say you make is after game 1 before game 2?
I think it's because you got to hit another team in week 1, and you know what your major flaws are, so you can really start working on those major flaws. So, and I think Coach Day and Kyle McCord kind of addressed it in their post game interviews. They acknowledged that it wasn't a great game. I think that we can all agree there's some play calling that we could improve on because it's not just the players that are improving; it's the coaching staff too. So Brian Hartline calling plays, working with Coach Day. I think that having Brian Hartline on the sideline, maybe we should put him back in the box because they have the ability to talk down on the sideline, but that's just a small example of the improvements that are made between game 1 and game 2. But overall, I think that it's just you got to put a helmet on someone else, and you know what your flaws are, so you can attack those and try to improve.
I'm going to poke the bear here tonight.
Do it.
Does Ryan Day miss Kevin Wilson, Chris?
I think to some extent. And yeah, and I was not Kevin Wilson's biggest
Ye-
fan, although I will, admit he did a decent job.
I
But
think
this is
Kevin.
this is the thing. He was the eyes in the sky. He
Correct.
was that offensive mind that was in sync with Ryan Day
Correct.
that could see the field from up high and say, "Listen, this is what's going on the field. This is what I'm seeing." Day could process that and decide what play to move with.
I'm wondering if there isn't a little bit of disjointed flow of information there from the box today. That
Yeah,
and
I
that
can see that.
and then given the fact that we have a new quarterback. We're breaking in 2 new tackles and a center on that offensive line. I think it was kind of asinine for the fan base to think we're going to look like we did against Georgia. There is no
Calm down,
way.
Herb Street.
There is no way that was the case. But we still want to have a standard, right?
But
So,
this is the thing too. With you mentioned Kevin Wilson. Kevin Wilson was a head coach.
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
Uh, Ryan Day had, I think, a lot of faith and a lot of trust in Kevin Wilson. That I don't know that he's built that up with Brian Hartline or whoever's in the box at this point yet.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
I think that you're right. I think there's definitely probably at least a little bit of a disconnect right there.
All right, so we're going to have 3 different videos this week if you're watching on YouTube. Let's start with the first one here. Let's break down this game historically and statistically first tonight, all right? The game is actually at 12 o'clock on BTN, so the first game on the Big 10 network for this season for the Buckeyes. It's a 12 o'clock, 12 noon kickoff. Nice little penguin there, a little mascot there for Youngstown. They're not the mobsters, Chris. They are the Penguins coming in to the Horseshoe to take on Ohio State. Now, looking at this thing by the numbers, there's not a whole lot of numbers to actually break down here. Ohio State and Youngstown State have played twice, both times when Jim Tressel was coach. And he told Tim May on the Tim May podcast today he did not enjoy these games. He has a very special place in his heart for Youngstown. Like I said, he won 4 national championships there. Number 2, he ended up becoming the president there after the fact. He did not like these games, but Ohio State played well, 43-0 and 38-6. You go back, Tressel could have just absolutely annihilated that place, but he didn't do it. Ohio State has never played Youngstown State in Youngstown for obvious reasons. They are the big dog. So both games have been at Ohio Stadium. This will be Ryan Day's first time coaching against the Penguins. He has a 46-6 record overall. Youngstown State is coached by Doug Phillips. This will be his first time coaching against Ohio State, and he is 12-17 overall. Interesting to note here, guys, the Penguins played at Kentucky last year and did decently well in that football game. Kentucky did not blow the doors off of them. Now, eventually, depth and recruiting rankings and talent won the day for Kentucky, but I also don't think Kentucky's nearly on the same level as Ohio State is, especially defensively. Chris, let's break down statistics next. You want to start with the Buckeyes or you want to start with the Penguins?
Well, let's start with the Buckeyes, Eric, because after week 1, a lot of fans, like you mentioned, might have been a little bit surprised at the statistics we had, specifically offensively. Kyle McCord, of course, led the team in passing and was statistically sound, despite what I would call a rough start. He completed 20 of 33 passes, 239 yards, 0 touchdowns. Did have a pick on a play where I just think he was trying to do too much. That as a quarterback, you never want to make that crossbody throw. Just trying to do too much. It's a far cry from what we expected last week when we entered the game. Maybe even more surprising was that we were limited. Our 2 first-round receivers were limited to 5 catches for 34 yards, but that's okay because Cade Stover and Julian Fleming stepped up. Stover's leading the team in yards right now. He had 98 receiving yards on 5 receptions. And then Julian Fleming led the team in receptions with 6, gaining 58 yards. Now, our running game, pretty solid there. Surprisingly, a little bit, was not so much that we were solid there, but that it wasn't Travion Henderson or Mayan Williams who led the way. It was Chip Trayanum who had 8 carries, 57 yards, 7.1 yards per carry. Henderson did add 12 carries for 47 yards. Mayan Williams, well, he got it when it counted. He got 2 touchdowns on 25 yards, 7 carries. Maybe the offensive player of the game might have been Jaden Fielding, guys. I mean, he came out there, he kicked 3 field goals, good on all 3, added 2 extra points, and had 2 big special teams tackles as well. Now, defensively for Ohio State, the first game may not have been a thing of beauty from the offense, but it was awesome from the defensive standpoint. Steel Chambers led the team, 6 tackles. Uh, Defensive line was disruptive, but man, it was Sonny Styles who led the team in tackles for loss. So that was something great to see. Ohio State did account for one sack late in the game from Hero Canoe. The Buckeyes, guys, they did limit Indiana to 153 total yards, 82 of those passing, 71 rushing, held them to 2.83 yards per play, and kept them out of the end zone in the 23-3 victory. Ohio State did not give up a play of more than 24 yards through the air, which was a big problem last year. Also did not give up a running play of more than 11 yards. So putting a stop to those big plays was a big thing. And the Buckeyes guys are currently ranked fourth in the nation in overall defense. So some definite positives there. So go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, so I was gonna. Oh, Aaron.
Sorry, guys.
I
Life
was
with a
gonna,
1-year-old.
I was gonna ask if anything jumped out statistically to either one of you guys with those stats. You know, I'll be honest. Cade Stover surprised me. Going back and watching the film again, we know he's good, but it sure felt like that was the guy that McCord is most comfortable with in this offense right now. Like he's
Yeah,
looking for him.
yeah. And the nice thing about Cade Stover is he can do it anywhere. He can get you those short, tough yards. But as we saw, he can bust down the seam. He's got a little bit of speed and athleticism. And the other thing was he was very solid blocking as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, Cade Stover, guys, he is the guy right now on that offense. Now, obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. he gets all the attention, but I don't know where the disconnect is there. I mean, this was McCord's guy all the way through high school. These guys have history.
Well, okay.
So
There's a theory out there. I'd love to get Aaron's take on this one. Coming your way, big guy.
Get it.
There is a rumor floating around, or maybe an idea floating around, that McCord is not the one who the offensive players, specifically the wide receivers, want as quarterback. If that's true, if it's true, I'm not saying it is, but if it's true, could that be one of the reasons why we saw maybe maybe some negative body language, Aaron? I mean, there was something going on there in the receivers that in that first game that just they didn't look themselves.
I agree, and that's very possible. I don't know the source of that rumor or that information, but if the receivers don't want McCord as their guy, there's a reason for that. It could be they just can't seem to establish on-field rapport with him. They can't get on the same wavelength, channel-wise, whatever the case. Because honestly, when you've been practicing all summer and spring with McCord, and I understand they've had a QB competition, so reps were probably split, but still, if you've been working with these guys all summer and spring and fall camp, and you're still getting short throws, underthrown, thrown behind, that indicates a problem to me. And we could discuss it and put a little bit of that on the offensive line. That would be fair and valid, but to hear you say that, it makes sense.
It
The
does.
negative, it does. It makes a lot of sense to me at this point. Negative body language, it could have been frustration too, though. Because I mean, I don't know how many targets Marvin had, but for him to only have 2 receptions, I can certainly understand as the number one wide receiver why you would have negative body language for that reason.
I believe he only had 5 or 6 targets total, Aaron.
And 2 receptions. And let's be real, it's not his hands that are the problem.
No.
That
So,
that first throw, I think Chris said almost he looked like a shortstop. He had to they were
yeah,
Yeah.
just like almost short hop to him,
he
and then
did.
he leaves them high and dry. Like I could understand the frustration there
Absolutely.
when you're used to C.J. Stroud putting the football like on a dime consistently, and now this guy's like all over the board. There could be some frustration there.
And do we think there was anything too after that play where McCord threw the bad pass and Harrison came down and nearly injured himself?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
there could be dude, what are you doing to me type of thing. Um, it you don't want to believe that they wanted the other guy to win, because if that's the case, then there's obviously a disconnect between the coaching staff and your best players. But there's only one way to find out, and that's going to be when Brown gets in, how does he look? If
Yeah.
you know he got two series in that Indiana game, and the first one was a joke. It was a
Right.
joke.
Yeah.
So I was kind of surprised Day announced McCord was going to start again. I thought he was going to come back and say, now it's Devin Brown's turn to start. And he didn't. He said McCord's going to get to start and that Brown's going to get going to get more significant playing time. Try. But
It's the
Yeah.
ego. It's the ego. I'm telling you, it won't let him. It won't let him give Devin Brown a fair shot at this point.
all right, Chris, let's look at the statistics on the other side of the football now with the Penguins from Youngstown State.
All right, so Youngstown State. All right,
Youngstown mistake.
no, they were anything but a mistake in their first game. In fact, they were an offensive machine. 52 points, 471 yards of total offense, including 302 yards on the ground. Their passing leader was Mitch Davidson, who had 11 and 19 for 130 yards. Did toss a touchdown pass versus Valparaiso. Rushing leader Tyshawn King, 11 carries, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. Deshaun Watley and Cephas Harris also contributed to that rushing attack. Watley adding 59 yards, Harris adding 58. All three of their backs, all three of their lead backs there, all averaged more than 8 yards a carry. So that was pretty phenomenal there. The receiving was led by returning all conference wide receiver Bryce Oliver. Oliver had 5 catches for 65 yards. CJ Charleston added 47 yards on 4 catches and a touchdown. But guys, defensively, the Penguins were solid as well. The defense is led by Alex Howard, and he leads the team in tackles with 9, sacks with 2, and tackles for loss with 3. Also, they've got a very disruptive returning all conference defensive lineman and Dylan Wedke. He's a disruptive force, and he's tied for the lead in fumble recoveries on this team with 1, along with Devin Johnson and Preston Zandler. YSU's defense was pretty solid versus Valparaiso. 5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, blowout win. But they're definitely going to face a little more of a challenge, I think, this week when they travel to Columbus. So that's it. That's the stats for YSU. Guys, let's just see how it equates on the field.
Yeah, I don't think Valparaiso is even in the same stratosphere as Ohio State. Like it's
Valparaiso is somebody that Alabama or Michigan would put on their schedule.
before they played their rival. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's what Alabama would do. Valpo's a basketball school. Let's just
They
be
are.
honest here. Uh, uh, it's a small town not too far from South Bend, Indiana, on your way to Chicago, in northern part of Indiana. Good engineering school. Doesn't have the reputation for engineering quite like Purdue does, but um, yeah, this is no compared. Those stats are going to look significantly different after their second game against Ohio State. You know, Youngstown State has guys. I don't know if any of them would even hold a roster spot on Ohio State. I don't know if their best guy would even practice squad, sure. But part of the 85, what do you think? Aaron, you saw the film. Is anybody worthy of a scholarship to Ohio State on their roster?
I mean, they'd probably be really, really serviceable fourth stringers.
Okay.
Uh,
So they're
but
walk-ons. They're
yeah,
walk-ons and back. Yeah, they're walk-ons and
I'm with you. Yep. Walk ons,
practice
practice
squad
squad
kids.
guys. Yep.
So there's no reason why Ohio State should not come out and put up a big number offensively and hold this team down defensively. Let's talk defense for just a second. So, I love the press conference today with Jim Knowles. I love Jim Knowles, by the way. Like, I know that the defense is getting things straightened out, and it's looking much better under Jim Knowles than Kerry Combs. Can we all agree on that?
Oh,
Yes.
there's
Absolutely.
no fight in that one.
The
Okay.
lack of big plays say that,
So they asked Jim Knowles first question: how much did you practice or plan for the option? And he said 8 plays, maybe. Now he brought it up before they went to Indiana. There was some intel coming his way that they were going to run the option. I don't know that I believe him in saying 8 plays. I think that they did prepare a little bit for that, but I thought they played incredibly well defensively. They were so sound schematically, and they stayed true to the technique in defending the option. I thought that was phenomenal. A plus there. It also explained a little bit on why I think the defensive ends were having a heck of a time getting home.
hmm
Yeah.
But I will say this to their defense, and Aaron, you can attest to this. A defensive end in the option is incredibly important because you have to stay in your lane, gap sound, and you have to set the edge and kick it back towards your linebackers who are going to clean it up, or your hybrid safety, which is Sonny Styles, who did a lot of cleaning up, or Proctor, who's just had his hair on fire coming down from the safety position, looking to send somebody to their early deathbed. Okay, so let's give the defense some props here. Okay, and now this week, after they did a doggone good job against an option team who they weren't expecting to be an option team, what improvements are you expecting defensively, Chris? And then Aaron, you can answer after Chris is finished.
Well, for me, I think the big thing is if we're not looking at the option, I need to see the defensive line getting home a little bit more. I need to see them getting more pressure on the quarterback and getting the quarterback down. Um, I think that's the biggest thing. And then the other thing is we did have a few instances where we had a little bit of trouble with just basic tackling technique a little bit.
Yes.
That is something that we've got to clean up. And the next two games are the games that we need to do that in.
To answer that though, before Aaron jumps in, they don't practice tackling as much as they used to for safety reasons. So I think at the beginning of the year it is a little bit
It's going to be a little bit sloppy, but that's what I'm
wonky
saying.
looking.
That's where we need to see the improvement.
And I can see Aaron's not happy about that comment, but that's the way it is, Aaron. It is. They don't practice it like they used to.
I understand, but they've came out with training tools, okay, that are pretty good about simulating tackling, okay? And I'm sure maybe you've seen some on Facebook or other social media sites, okay? They have these, I don't even know what they're called because they came out after even I was done coaching, but they were a new idea when I had left Olentangy. They're like these big rings, right? They
Tackling
go,
donuts. Mm-hmm.
sure, yeah, you send them rolling and you go and tackle it.
Mm-hmm.
Why? You know what I mean? It's the same motion. You're wrapping up and dragging, rugby style tackling. And again, I know the donut can't stiff arm, it can't hop over you, it can't do those things. But even fundamentally, from little league, middle school to high school, you know not to grab a guy by the shoulder pads.
Right.
You know to at least hit the waist. You don't need a ton of practice to know that. You know what I mean? So I would look for that to be. I'm with Chris, man. That's got to be one of those things that you at least talk about. Like, why are you grabbing up here and trying to force a guy down or trying to wrap his shoulders and fall over with him? I talked about it in the post game show. That crap does not work against
Right.
Notre Dame. It does not work against Penn
Mm-mm.
State, Wisconsin, none of those guys.
They
So
have a big, strong running back at Notre Dame who's going to break those
Yeah.
easily.
yeah, 100%. Even if
Mm-hmm.
hey, look, even if it's Tommy Two Thumbs, all right, he's a human being too. You grab a hold of somebody who's strong or stronger than you, or gets leverage, you're
hmm
not making that tackle, man.
So you saw the film, Aaron. Last question here on this video. You saw the film. does the offense that Youngstown State run give this defensive line more opportunities to get home and get those sacks this week?
It does. And of course,
More traditional, right?
It is a little bit more traditional in the way they run their spread because it is a spread offense. To nobody's surprise, that's what everybody does these days: spread offense, speed and space, the whole thing, zone blocking. Um, but yeah, and again, that's subject to change because I'm sure they saw what Indiana was able to do. Maybe they feel like they can execute it better. Maybe not. Might not be in their wheelhouse. You know, the 3-step drop, quick hit passes, stuff like that. RPO, they might be able to hit that a little bit better, and it depends on matchups. But if Ohio State's playing a zone and their quarterback is smart enough to read that, and shame on Ohio State if they're not disguising their coverages, by the way, because at this level, if you're not disguising your coverages, what are you doing? But it just depends on what they see. So,
Okay. All right. So, thank you so much, Chris, for bringing the statistics. Not much history there with Youngstown State, only 2 games. Looking forward to it. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, all those good things if you haven't done so already.